Hi, welcome to our talk. I'm Fred and this is John, and we're with Nuon. Well, we are Nuon. And we're going to talk today about powering BYOC for everyone with ClickHouse.
Yeah, I'm John, founder of the company here, and we're a small team. One of the bets we made early on was actually leveraging, a couple sort of like big bets on the infrastructure side. And ClickHouse is one of those few, and yeah, we've kind of gone all in. So we have both some awesome and maybe a couple war stories to share as well.
For sure, and my name is Fred. They make me do a lot of cloud stuff at Nuon. So. Cool, and today we'd like to talk a little bit about Nuon's architecture and some of the context in the problem space, our current use of ClickHouse, and we're, surprise, surprise, writing OTEL logs to it. Our framework specifically for reading and writing from ClickHouse, and we'll touch on some features we're looking to build.
Awesome, so if you're here a couple times tonight, we've already heard about folks who are running software or agents or different parts of their platform in customer accounts. At Nuon, we're like super bullish on this. This thing called Bring Your Own Cloud is this new deployment model where the software, the full stack, maybe an agent, maybe a data collector, is deployed to the customer account, but then it's managed by the vendor. So the customer gets all the benefit of like isolation, integrating with their systems, but then the vendor has the ability to make updates, make it feel like SaaS. And at Nuon, our mission is to make it feel like SaaS. So we're kind of like, as we're thinking about that, there's a lot of overlay with the sort of ClickHouse use cases and what we're building, because naturally, like you mentioned, the whole OTEL stack, which was one of the reasons we were so bullish early on.
So one of the big things Nuon does is it allows you to package your app and deploy it into your customer's VPC. But obviously, getting the app in there is just the first step of the progress of the process. What happens the next day, right? You want to monitor, you want to export metrics. You might need to troubleshoot, unfortunately. At least I don't write perfect software. And that's the second thing we're aiming to do, and that's where all this OTEL stuff comes into play. So,
yeah, so it's like part packaging, day one, bring your application as it is today, deploy to the customer account, and then day two is where all the fun and hardship starts, as I like to refer to it. And somebody mentioned before about having all customers on the same version. Live that life as long as you can, because I highly recommend that. But yeah.
Cool, so let's dig into how we're using ClickHouse at Nuon. So, like I mentioned before, we have a OTEL backend, and our logs are OTEL compatible. And we have a couple of things that we do. We make builds, we run deploys, we have runners that are doing all sorts of arbitrary work potentially, and then we have a concept of actions. And all of those things write logs. So here's a really good question, right? Why ClickHouse? I don't think I can say anything better than like some of the talks you just heard, so I'll speak from my perspective. I really appreciate the localization of some of these concerns. TTLs, SQL query. Backups, a config in your database. Pretty excellent, and of course, it's incredibly powerful if you write your schema correctly. Another major point for us is the tooling.
Yeah, and so I think for us, it was like the tooling was two sides, right? Like you're looking at the ecosystem, you look across the sort of like OTEL movement, you see the sort of standard exporter, all the sort of different companies that are building open source software to get data into ClickHouse and then query it from ClickHouse. But then also like, because it kind of feels like a relational database, you can also leverage it like a relational database. And that's one of the bets that we took. So internally at Nuon, we have a large monolithic API. We're building it in Go. We're using an ORM called Gorm. And one of the reasons that we were excited about this in the early days was like, hey, like if we can just leverage the ClickHouse data model anywhere where we already have models in our code base, we can quickly enable our entire team to build features and leverage the system. And so that plus the OTEL sort of ecosystem, and then this other part, which I kind of think about as the operator experience. One of the things that ClickHouse does is when you think about backups, you're thinking about even like replication or understanding how your data is laid out on disk. That's all built into the query engine. So you can kind of interact and operate the system with essentially pure SQL. Not always, but most of the time.
All right, so we'd like to just touch on our architecture just a little bit. So at Nuon, we have a control plane, data plane split. And our control plane is an API with a couple of temporal workers. And our data plane is a little special. It's made out of these runners. And runners are essentially agents that run alongside a BYOC app in the customer's VPC. And all of these things write their logs to ClickHouse through the control API. So this is this is made possible by the tooling that we've built around it.
Yeah, and part part of this, like our vision is to make it feel like SaaS. So on this side, you have customers like pushing updates and pushing all of their builds and their artifacts to Nuon so they can update their customers. But then each of these different VPCs or customer accounts, they're actually also kind of like pulling and fetching and managing the software locally. And so one of the challenges here is, if you can imagine, there's hundreds or thousands of these runners, and they all have to check in and do health checks and like a lot of the classic sort of OTEL challenges, or sorry, observability challenges that you would have. And
so to keep things brief, let's talk a little bit about our tooling. We're very, very happy with our tooling. And initially when we brought in ClickHouse, there's a big concern, right? Are we gonna get sprawl around all these technologies, right? Do we have to use SQLX or do we want to use something else? No, we don't. We want a unified interface to access all of our data no matter where we are in the code base. So on the right side, I guess, we have Gorm, and it was off the shelf, out of the box, ready to use. All we had to do was add a new connection, write some of the longest struct tags I've ever seen in my life, and we were off to the races, right? And what this gave us was the ability to read and write from all of our data sources with the same interface, which honestly, it sounds really simple when you say it, but it's very, very powerful as a productivity tool internally.
yeah, and I think one of the things, like we started RDS, Postgres, like most companies do. I think at this point we're 75 plus tables, and it was important to be able to work with ClickHouse data alongside everything else. And so even from the first days, I think everybody on the team was actually able to contribute to the ClickHouse data, start reading and writing. Obviously that has some challenges because we also, with one interface, it can feel a little too much like relational data at times. But over the sort of 8 months or so we've been running this in production, we figured out most of those gaps. And as the tooling kind of expands, because we only have 2 databases, we have that operational simplicity, right? It's essentially RDS, ClickHouse, and like the operator experience is kind of built in. And as the local development's built in, and everybody kind of has the same tools.
Another thing that helps us work with ClickHouse really well is that we've written a lot of custom tooling or plugins for Gorm. So the big one that we were leveraging now is a plugin architecture that allows us to swap out the table under a query with a view. So you can imagine why this would be very, very useful for ClickHouse. We can write tables that have very specific performance characteristics for specific access patterns. And we can just use that pretty seamlessly, just swapping out the table for a view. And finally, what we've done is we've written a SAP logger with OTEL Zap, and we use that in all of our workflows. Again, the control plane and the data plane, they're all workers. The workers that are temporal workers, so they're workflows. All of the workflows have access to this logger. So everyone is also writing to the ClickHouse OTEL log collector with a unified interface, which is incredibly useful. And it enables some pretty neat things, especially in a distributed system.
I mean, we've also had to dig around with like the OTEL Zap tooling. We're a Go shop, we're using Zap, structured logs everywhere. But the interesting thing about this is actually like when you think about our platform, it's really like there's 3 stakeholders. There's Nuon, which is helping orchestrate all these different customer accounts. There's the customer account where the runner is deployed, and then it's you, the vendor. And so naturally, you have to kind of collect and aggregate logs from a lot of different places. So investing in this, our API is actually just an OTEL HTTP exporter compatible system. We use these loggers kind of like wrapping in Zap, but it can be whatever, to collect not only like system information from Nuon's side or from the vendor side, but also deep in the customer account when needed. And then we can build this sort of seamless time series of that across both a customer install or across like a specific update or a rollout or a new customer coming on board.
And finally, we'll touch on some features that we're really looking forward to leveraging using ClickHouse. So right now, we're really barely scratching the surface. We've like operationalized our specific use cases now, but we have a couple of ideas in the pipeline. For example, dynamic tables. You can imagine how having a table per org or user or install even might be useful. We haven't touched rollups yet, but we're very excited to use that for some of our long-lived data. We have OTEL metrics, but we also have heartbeats and health checks, and we're really eager to have like long-lived status pages and stuff like that. Materialized views, they just sound really cool. I really wanted to find a use case. And we did implement all of the OTEL metrics, but we're only using logs right now. But as as more vendors onboard and we learn what their monitoring patterns are like, we can productionize other concepts from the OTEL metrics and make those first class.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things as well that's super interesting about our use case is like We're actually, like the heart beating system, we have all these runners in different customer accounts. And these runners get dispatched jobs that they're running in foreign environments. And one of the things that we're doing is we're pushing heartbeats to basically make sure they're online at all times, because anything can happen. A customer can go delete something, they can change like a route table, anything like that. And so we've been able to sort of leverage and like actually just collect a lot more time series data up front. It has come with some of the challenges. So like we're doing async inserts for some of that. And so like kind of figuring out some of that in production, but yeah.
And yeah, that's it.
Demo?
Yeah, we'll show you. It's pretty cool. So here we have one of our runners, and all we're going to do is fire off a component build. So we have an app defined here, and it has a ton of components. It's called Kitchen Sink for a reason. This deploys a bunch of things, including ClickHouse and some LLMs. But we're just going to go ahead and build a component so we can see those sweet, sweet logs streaming in.
So this is our SaaS vendor control plane. When you use us, you get this kind of like bird's eye view of everything. And these logs are actually like being created like at the sort of like job site. And so when they're being pushed, like they could be coming from anywhere, but they're also collected. So this stream is actually combining the runner logs. If you look at that service name there, runner logs, API logs, also logs coming from temporal, all together into one stream. And part of the challenge for us is, if you think about a customer job and you're running a customer job in a customer's account, a vendor job in a customer's account, it could be like a Terraform deploy that has an hour's worth of logs, or it could be a build that has like 3 logs that, you know, basically an empty Docker file. And so for us, like being able just to throw everything in ClickHouse has been really helpful.
And I think that's it.
So are you like converting the logs from different sources to OTEL, and then that's part of your service?
Yes, we do that. So if you have like if you're a vendor who has like an app that has like Terraform or like a Helm chart, we're gonna run those jobs in the customer account, and then we'll convert them into OTEL and show you in that stream. So it's not always perfect, but for the most part, you get that kind of experience. And part of it is like we have a lot of tooling around Zap, and so we centralized around Zap, which is like a Go structured library that writes into the OTEL ecosystem, which goes into our ClickHouse.
So do you figure out how to like associate these different sources to the same like job ID or whatever? It's like just...
Yeah, we create what's called a log stream, and so depending upon different parts of the product or different rollouts, like sometimes a log stream is long-lived across different deploys. Sometimes it's like short-lived for, you know, a single job. And actually, part of our ClickHouse write path will dual write to multiple log streams in some cases to make the querying a little easier.